Next on. So hi again, everybody. I'm really pleased that we are here in person today. This feels really strange a little bit because well, the last presentation I did was mostly on virtual things. So, and I'm glad that you are here at home too, watching this presentation. My name is Robert Simard, and I'm an historian. So, what do historians eat in the winter? Same thing as in the summer. History. So today we're going to focus on natives, First Nations, Champlain, and the Battle of the Long-Sault. In this presentation, sometime I will stop and I will ask you questions. So I just want to test your knowledge on certain things. So if you feel free to participate, okay? Great. Yeah, I think we lost the. We lost the remote.
It was talking a bit before.
So in my title, I wrote occupation and territorial, let's see, control at the Long-Sault on the Ottawa River. People know where the Long-Sault is situated?
In Cornwall.
Near Cornwall, okay? How about another answer? You, sir?
On the Long-Sault, it's Grenville.
Yeah, that's it. Grenville to Carillon. So the Long-Sault, or in French Long-Sault, is a series of chutes and rapids that are on the Ottawa River, starting in Carillon and ending up in Grenville. But the higher part is Grenville and the lower part is Carillon. Today, everything has disappeared underneath water because they built in 1959 to 1963 the dam at Carillon. So when you look at the landscape, it's not the same as it used to be because the water was way down, lower on the ground. We have more than 60 feet of high water over the natural bed of the water. Okay, so a long time ago, how long time ago do we start this story? We're going to start in a time where everything was ice in North America. At the place you are sitting now, even at home, unless you are sitting in New Zealand or in California, but everywhere in Canada, there was an ice age about 15,000 years ago. 15,000 years ago, you had like more than 2 kilometers of ice above your head.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it is quite incredible. To figure out 1 kilometer of ice, it's just like you've been walking 1 kilometer, you go down to Morin Heights on the other side of the highway there, and you put it like this. This was the amount of ice that was on the land in these days. So 15,000 years ago is not that far in the story of Earth, of planet Earth. Planet Earth has 5 billion years of age. We are at 15,000 years ago. If you count like 1 second to go to 1 million seconds, it will take you close to 11 days and a half. If you do not stop counting, 1, 2, 3, up to 1 million. But if you count to 1 billion, how much time will it take you to go to the billion? It will take you more than 32 years. So that's the difference between 1 million year and 1 billion year. It's quite incredible. I figure now, does our governments know that? When they're spending money, when they're saying, oh, we're going to spend 5 billion here and 2 billion there. So it's a lot of time. And in the story of our Earth, 15,000 years, it's just like closing your eyes. So 15,000 years ago, we had that 1 kilometer or 2 kilometer of ice over our head. And the ice melted because the earth got hotter. See? And slowly, ice melting. So the thing that happened when all that weight on the earth crust happened, it's just like when you're sleeping in your bed, okay? And you have that brand new mattress, you know, that take its original form every time you get up. So the earth is the same thing. The way that the earth crust works is that it absorbs the weight, and then after that, it takes its original shape without the erosion that the rocks that are, you know, carried with the retreat of the ice with the shape, the mountains and everything. So while melting, it happens that these rocks that are underneath our feet, that are the Laurentians mountain, you know, you see, they are the oldest mountains on the planet Earth. And they are the thickest and the strongest rocks on the planet Earth. They were part of an immense, I would say, continent that was named the Laurentia back 650 million years ago, close to 1 billion years ago. And that big continent moved around the Earth with the movement of the planet and the tectonic plates. And it kind of shaped. And those mountains that we are sitting over, those mountains were the highest mountains on the Earth back in those days. It is said that they were more than 10 kilometers high. So now I see you thinking, right, okay. So he's telling me that the Laurentians were higher than the Mount Everest. Yeah, because Everest Mountain is about 8 kilometers and 900 or so. See, 8.9. So they were higher than the Mount Everest. What happened? Just like I told you, the earth crust moves, and it has been shaped by the retreats of ice and the movement of tectonic plates. So here in our part, you know, we are sitting over these oldest mountains that we call the Canadian Shield. You remember that from your old geographic courses, eh? So it kind of shaped like that, the high strategy, and we have that sea there, the Champlain Sea. Oh, it's all right. The Champlain Sea, that was a big sea. And why we had a sea there, it's because when the ice retrieved, there were like holes in the ground, and the mountains kind of tried to come up slowly. And we are like, at that time, 13,000 years ago. And it kind of getting up, and the water filled all the holes, just like it does when it rains. See? So the Champlain Sea, if we want to have a little picture of what it is. Let's see here, sorry. Up here, it's Mont-Laurier. So the beaches of Champlain Sea, up north, we're at Mont-Laurier. You know where Mont-Laurier is? That's about an hour and a half from here, driving from Moronice. So it's kind of surprising. And all the St. Lawrence Valley was covered with water. And that water, you know, was shaped during millions of years, just like we see on these pictures. You know, we have the Canadian Shields and the ice, and then the Canadian Shield going up, and we see how it shaped. And even the Mount Royal appeared during that time. It was an old volcano, see? And kind of got out of the ground because of the weight was removed over that ground. And this is how it shaped the Mont Royal. And We know now the height of the Champlain Sea. That's the Radio-Canada Tower in Montreal. It was almost over Radio-Canada Tower back in those days. So it's quite incredible to imagine that it was water all over. See, and Montreal is a little bit higher than the lower parts of the St. Lawrence Valley. So we have the Champlain Sea here, and we see all the beaches from north to south of the Champlain Sea. We have the St. Lawrence Valley and the Ottawa River. So see, we are at Gore here and Maronites right here. So there were beaches here of the Champlain Sea and Maronites. So that means that if you dig the ground, sometimes you could find shells, prehistoric shells, coquillages, that are encrusted into rocks. You could find fossils here in Maronites while digging the ground, in the sandy beaches that you could find there. See? So, and up to Mont-Laurier and Fermeneuve. I remember at one time one of my teachers told me, do you know that there were sandy beaches in Mont-Laurier? I said, that's incredible. I could not imagine that the Champlain Sea could go up there, but it does. And every place they find fossils, they put on the map little shells. Okay. After that, about 9,500 years ago, the Champlain Sea became the Lampsilius Lake. Yeah, I will surprise you again. Lampsilius, it's an Algonquin word that was used to describe whales. Excuse me, no problem. So, if they named that lake Lampsilius Lake, and they named it in the name of a whale, it's probably because they were whales traveling all over the St. Lawrence Valley. Yeah.
They would have taken salt water.
Of course. It would have taken, so can you imagine that the Champlain Sea and the Lampsilius Lake were salt water? Probably. How do we know that? We dig the ground. Everywhere on the St. Lawrence Valley, and everywhere there's a black dot, there were whale's bones that was digged from the ground. Okay, and can you imagine humpback whales traveling right over Lachute, going to Ottawa, to Pembroke, Ontario, Smiths Falls, Ontario. This is the kind of fossils that they found. Yeah, at Smiths Falls in 1874. So that gave us the clue that there were whales in that lake. Okay, and probably I see you thinking, you know, in your head, in your eyes, that okay, so when the humans, when are the humans right there? You know, where can we find traces of human occupation on the land in the Laurentians? I get the answers. Okay, but first, we're gonna do a little quiz here. Okay, you know what quiz are? Okay, you have to answer the question that and I will give you choices. Okay, 4 choices. So, before the arriving of Christopher Columbus in America in 1491, okay, let's picture America from the southern part, so I mean the Terre de Feu in Chile, up to the northern part, we could say Kuujjuaq. How many people were living in America before the first contact? Lots of people. Well, let me give you the answers of the question. Okay. The first one, we could start at, let's say, 10,000. So at 10,000 means that your neighbor is not that far. It will be really far, so you could play chainsaw every Sunday morning without bothering anybody. See, So 10,000, 100,000, 1 million, or 125 million people. So who would say 1? Nobody. Who would say 2? We say 100,000. Who would say 3? 1 million. Who would say 4? 125 million. Almost everybody would say 4. It's incredible. You're great. You are great.
On peut le voir.
Oh yeah, you see it there. Oh yeah, okay. Good. So you're not listening to me, you're reading. It's okay, it's okay. My mistake. But you know, I wanted you to be surprised. It's really surprising, but because it's not the number that they told you at school when you were younger. You know, what they told you at school when you were younger is probably that America was a virgin territory without any people living there. But the truth is that there was more than 125 million people living in America. You just have to imagine the Aztec world when the Spaniards arrived at Tenochtitlan, which is the city of Mexico today. There were 2 million people living in that big city of Tenochtitlan. And just a little bit further, like 60 miles or close to 100 kilometers from there, there's Teotihuacan, the big Aztec pyramids. And probably we imagine that there were more than 2 million people living there. So, and that society brings us to 2,000 years ago. So the human occupation of America is as old as is the Europe one. And in those days, Europe, they had like 30 million people to 40 million people. So probably America was more populated than Europe. What happened? We have it here, diseases. The first contact created a bacteriological contact. So the Native American, they didn't have the anti-scalp, the protection from these illnesses that were really old in Europe. And so they brought them with them. So it's variole, petite vérole, varicelle, smallpox. So these illnesses, these diseases killed, I would say, surprisingly, 9 out of 10 person. So we are 18 here, probably only 2 of us would have survived. So when Jacques Cartier arrived here in the St. Lawrence Valley, he encountered certain tribes in the St. Lawrence Valley up to Hochelaga, that special village on the island of Montreal. And 90 years later, Champlain did the same voyage and he encountered nobody up to the Long-Sault on the Ottawa River. So the people kind of deserted the St. Lawrence Valley because of the disease. It's just like they said, this is not a good place to go live because of that illness. So for 100 years, so for the first 100 years after the first contact, this is what happened. And can you imagine, you know, like 440 to 50 guys getting on a boat without, you know, for a month or 2 without washing, not eating any vegetable or fruits or stuff like that. You know, the voyage from Europe to America was something really awful to do in those days. And they didn't even brush their teeth. So, can you imagine the first contact when they say hello? So it's quite surprising, and to me it was a shock when I read at first that well, all these information comes from a book written by an American journalist, Charles C. Mann. He wrote the story of America in 1491. So the year before the arriving of Christopher Columbus. It's an amazing book. And then after that, he wrote 1493, which is the following years after the first contact, how do the Native American reacted on that first contact? What did it change in their society, economically, politically, culturally, and everything? It's really interesting books that American journalist wrote on the history of, and the only thing he did, he connected information from the archaeologist, the anthropologist, the historian, the medical science, the history of medical science and everything. He just connected all these information all together, and he came up with that really interesting book. So if you want to take note, it's easy to remember, 1491 and 1493, okay? So, oops, yeah. This is what I was saying, on the first contact on the Ottawa Valley in 1534, when Cartier arrived, he met people all around. And you see, there were Hurons, there were Algonquin, there were Iroquois, and the Iroquois of the St. Lawrence Valley, they were occupying all the valley from Quebec to the Long-Sault, and they were taking control of that, that space, that big territoire, because they were doing commerce with all the other tribes. So they were really organized, not like our cities today. It's nothing to be compared, but they were organized society living all together. And when the French, the English, and the Netherlands arrived, and the Spaniards, they created alliances, like teams, and they got into fight. And then America became a stage for their fights, their wars. This is an interesting theory that we that I kind of reckon with, is the locking of the St. Lawrence Valley during these days, just before the arriving of Champlain. It's like, just like I told you, because of the diseases, the Iroquois, they closed the valley. So this is all, you see, you have here the Richelieu, St. Lawrence, and the Ottawa River, and here is the Long-Sault. So why the Long-Sault is so particularly a strategic place to control? It's because it's the last place, the last place on the Ottawa River that it's navigable before getting off the river. And by getting off the river to do portage, then you tend to be vulnerable. And the forest is a really good place to hide and to do ambushes on the people traveling, because they really had to get off the river. At that point, I would say that the Long-Sault, let's go back here. The Long-Sault, the Carillon Fall was as high as the ceiling here. Okay, so that was the big Carillon Fall. And then after that, you have the Chute à Blondeau. Chute à Blondeau was the height of a man, 5 to 6 feet. But the head of the Long-Sault started in Breeze's Point and ended up in Grenville, up there. And that was 45 feet high. So that was the strongest fall of the Long-Sault. And it was a series of falls. And at the bottom of it, just in Breeze's Point, there is a hole in the river that go as deep as 300 feet. So today, with the dam, Carillon Dam, it's close to 360 to 380 feet deep. So can you imagine that some people say that there is a little tunnel going underneath it? So in our history, people came, scientists from the Journal of Glaciology, they came to observe a certain phenomenon that happened there in Breeze's Point. And that was before the construction of the dam. The thing is that the power of the water that was hitting close to that big thing was creating some fragile on top of it. And it's just like when it was really, really cold, all the river was like Brazil, you know? Brazil is a kind of a yogurt. Yeah, yeah. You know, something really smooth on the tongue, and yeah. So it was a phenomenon that was remarked by, observed by Chevalier. I forgot his name. I'm sorry, but in 1675, and then after that, Alexander Mackenzie observed it in 1810, and then after that, in 1953, they came and they did a little scientific article on that phenomenon that happened on the Ottawa River. So that was close to here. So the decline of the population on the St. Lawrence Valley is about the same as the decline that we saw in America. Probably close to 100,000 to 1/10 left after 100 years. So it's quite incredible, the first contact that happened. But these stories we never heard of before, see? These are the First Nation on the Ottawa River that we see. We have the Wescarini, the Anancharan, we have the Long-Sault here, the North River that goes up there like this, la Rivière Rouge, and then les Pays d'en Haut, where the Hurons were. And we have the Quiché-Sipirini. Quiché-Sipirini means the people of the Long River. The Wescarini means the people of the deer people, the peuple des chevreuils. You know, they were traveling, they were nomads, eh? They were going down south, close to the Ottawa River in summertime to fish and following, well, a bit of the deer. And then in wintertime, they were getting up north to Nominang Lake. You know where Nominang Lake is? So they were walking through thick forest. They had no map to have any orientation to see, but they knew in there. You know, they had this anthropological, cultural feeling that they knew, oh, that type of mountain just behind there must be a valley. And in that valley, probably there's a river that's running through that we could travel on. And in that type of river, we could fish. We could fish trout, whichever fish is there. And they knew that in the North River, just by Lachute, the big chute in Lachute, there were salmon living in there. They were fishing salmon. We have stories in our museum in the Carillon about the first pioneer family living in Lachute, fishing salmon just behind the Laurentian High School, because there was a long chute there and the salmon was going up the river. You know why the salmon never came back? Because we constructed dams on that river. This is the only reason. Otherwise, we probably had, you know, I hope that, well, I'm dreaming in my head, you know, that in a certain future, there will be no dams on the river so that the fishes will come back. That would be great, you know, we'll be fishing salmon and, you know, people will come from Japan to fish salmon in Lachute. So, but, yeah, it's a dream. Okay. So this is the portrait of what was our territory before the arriving of Samuel de Champlain, and before the arriving of Nouvelle-France, and before the arriving of pioneer families. So you imagine Wescarinis, but that portrait is close to, I would say, the 1600s, because before, all of this was in Iroquois possession. How do we know that? That's a graph. That's a topographical graph, okay, made by archaeologists showing the vectors of communication of tribes on our territory in Argenteuil. So we have here the Ottawa River that goes up. Okay, we have Grenville here. We have St. Andrews here. We have Lachute here, and then going up north, we have Gore and everything. So the red path is where there were certainly a lot of traveling of natives. See, so that was a principal vector, and all the others, the yellow path, were like intermediate vectors of communication. But we see here that there was a strong one going up to the chute and then following the ridge of mountain of the Laurentian Shield, you know, just by the North River. So they were probably using the valley of the North River to travel and go up north, up to Moronites and then Val David and places like that, okay? So that means that here, there must have been some human occupation of the land back in those days. We know that there were here in St. Andrews because we dig the ground and we found natives artifacts that were buried in the ground. With the museum, we pinpoint places that there were archaeological survey in the land. And you see here, this is the St. Andrews Golf Course, okay? So right there at the X mark, up back to, I would say, 5,000 years ago, there were people living there. 5,000 years ago. So that's a long time ago. And they were living up to here. That's the Rouge River Road between St. Andrews and St. Armand's. And there were people farming the land there 3,000 years ago. They were farming the land. So that means that they were cropping. What did they crop? Probably the Three Sisters. You remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Corn. And then you have the zucchinis or the squash on the ground with their big leaves protecting the ground and keeping humidity to for the corn. And then you have serpenting all around the corn stick, the beans. Yeah. So they probably did crop because we found tools that they were using to do the flour, you know, and to make that little bread that we know today is called the banik. So they probably did that traditional bread there back in those days. And the first farmers of the Laurentian, they were women. They were women. They were not men. Men were hunting and picking up the bees. Not the bees, but the berries. But the women, they were the one farming the land. So it's quite incredible. And here in Grenville too. So we know that there were Iroquois living close to the Long-Sault. And we know that there were Wescarini because in their oral tradition, we heard stories about going to that big fall. So we had Iroquois before, and then after that, so that probably explained the deserting of the Ottawa, the St. Lawrence Valley from the Iroquois people. See, they were replaced by the Wescarini just before the arriving of Champlain. Yeah, you have a question?
Are there still Wescarini that we know?
Well, you know, I brought this book here, and I'm going to show it to you. This is Jean-Guy Paquin. He's a guy from the Petite Nation, okay? And he's the kind of the guardian of the knowledge of the Wescarini back in the Petite Nation. He's really an interesting guy, and he writes book on the Wescarini history. So that's something that you could look into, okay? So this is the kind of artifact that we have at the museum in Carillon. So that's a flint chisel, okay? That chisel was used to probably crush the grain to turn it into flour. Probably used to empty the trees so that they could you know, use their little boats, because the canoes were not made of birch skin. It was made probably like the old pirogue, you see. So they kind of dig into the wood, and they were using a big piece of a tree to travel on the river. We have this too. That's a primitive axe Oh, we have that thing here up over, right? That's kind of hiding the, can we remove it? I'll let you, I'll let my technician Chloe do it. Yeah.
Question on it.
Yeah.
The Iroquois, it was it mainly Mohawk? At
No,
that time? No?
No, they were, les Iroquois,
Specific?
yeah,
Oh, really?
the Iroquois from the St. Lawrence Valley were not Mohawk. Mohawks are part of the Five Nation, yeah, and the Mohawks that we that we know that are living in Oka, and that they were deported people. Yeah, it's like displaced population. They were living near Sault-Récollet in Montreal, and those people, they were took from them there en route, you see, and they were expatriated to the Oka sanctuary or reserve, you know, because in those days the reserve was not there, but you know, the Récollets that were the Sulpiciens, to whom was granted the Seigneurie du Lac des Deux Montagnes, they decided to bring these people with them to live there, but it was not part of their ancient territorial whatsoever. No, they are displaced people, you know, deported. So that's the oddity, and we can understand that they're claiming, you know, they're claiming the land because everything here, everything around here, it was theirs before. It was us. See, so yeah. So it's kind of a, yeah. So we have a primitive axe here, an ancient archaic era that's between 4,000 years ago to 6,000 years ago. So we know that the human occupation of the Lower Laurentian is really old, but it's not that old. When you figure that in the Chic-Choc or in the Gaspésie, it's more like 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. And if we go down south, it's even older than that, okay? Why don't we have any traces of dinosaurs here in the Laurentian? You know why?
We're underwater.
It's too old.
No, well, at one time it must have been hot here. No, it's because of the ice age, the multiplicity of ice age that we have, and the fact that the ice retreated with. Hello.
That's good.
Oh yeah. I think you have to sign some papers. With Chloe in the back will help you sign papers. Okay. So it's probably because of that, you know. So the ice, while melting, it retrieved with all the rocks any traces of occupation. And there are two major things too that happened in our history. Asteroids, you know. One, you ever heard of the Eye of Quebec? Yeah, it's something that we discovered when we built the Manic 5 dam. By closing two mountains with the dam and by filling it up, all the land with the water, it appeared like a big eye. And that thing there was an asteroid from the outer space that hit the planet. And it's really huge. And it went down so deep that we can't even dig far enough to find whatsoever is in that rock. And so probably that, when it hit, it is said that in a fraction of a second, 2,000 kilometers of land, all surrounding that place where it hit, went up in fire in a matter of 1 second. And that the fire burned for 150 years. It's incredible. If you ever want to read more on the prehistoric history of Quebec, there's a guy who wrote a book in French, Histoire de la préhistoire du Québec. And it's really interesting. I do not know if it's in English, but I do not recall his name either. But I could put it on and send it to Chloe for a reference, okay? So here we are, we're the ancient archaic era, and oh, I figured that we're stuck on the image. So Chloe, I think that by hiding that thing, I can't change. Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah, that's funny. That's the little thing with technology. You know, me as an historian, as you all know, we kind of invented the art of being brief. Yeah, but in 14 volumes. So you know, I can talk and talk and talk. And I see the time is quickly going through. So that's a tanoir. Tanoir was used to work on the skin, animal skins and everything. That's really ancient too. And pipes. There was a place near Calumet River. Do you know the Calumet River? That's close to Grenville, down south. And in Calumet, there was really a place that was famous for the Native American encountering of tribes. You know, and they go there and they will find that little rocks, and they made pipes out of that little rocks. So these fragment of pipes comes from that close to that place. Okay. Oops.
Yeah, it's not working anymore.
That's not working.
I'll have to press it.
Okay, arrowheads. What is the particularity of all these arrowheads? They're made of what? Stones. Stones.
And the end.
Yeah, it's not bones.
Oh, no.
Stones. And can you imagine, you know, going back to what you have, like the memory of the prehistoric world, you know, with the all these prehistoric men, you know, then with their arrows, like you know, they were. It was the Stone Age, but we had the Stone Age too here in America, which is quite incredible, you know. So every time I remember back when I was a young kid and learning in school that America was an inhabited land, and I see that, I go like, wow, something went wrong in its transmission of the information. So why they did not tell us that there were people before? Either they didn't know, or they didn't want us to know. All right. I think that my questions are not relevant. It is probably because the story that we heard is always the story of those who won the war. So white people won the war, we heard the story of white people. That's the thing. But as an historian, you know, we kind of revisited all the stories that we heard, and we're building now a new history of America with all these facts and artifacts that we found along the way. Okay, pottery. This here, those little lines, tells us that this Iroquois from the valley, from Iroquois Valley, the St. Lawrence Valley. That was their typical way of doing pottery. Okay. And we have those artifacts at the museum in Carillon, which is quite incredible. How do we have that? It's because those people who dig the ground, they decided to leave what they found on the ground in Argenteuil to the museum, because we had a museum that was built in 1938. So that's quite a long time ago, right? 85 years. You have here Algonquin dictionary from 1544, from the first encounter. Numbers. How do we count the numbers? Because we inherited lots of words from that first encounter. Canada, Quebec, Wananish, Ottawa, Nominang. See, it's everywhere. in our, and this is another. So these dictionaries, you can find it on the internet really easily. You just type Algonquin dictionary and you will have everything. That Long-Sault that we were talking about in Champlain, voyage from 1613, he described it as quinze chiens. Quinze chiens, that was what the Whiskerini named. So how the Whiskerini named the Long-Sault, quinze chiens. Oh, who's this man? Yeah, everybody knows it, right? And it's even written down his page, on page 100. Oh, wow. Are you sure it is Samuel de Champlain?
Without his hat, usually. has his
Yeah,
hat.
yeah, you're pretty sure, right? Yeah. I just have to tell you something. Back in those days, they didn't have any iPhones to take quick pictures, and Champlain couldn't take a selfie of himself and post it on the internet. See, so I will surprise you again. That image of Champlain is not Samuel de Champlain. No, that image of Champlain is Michel Particelli. Back in 1654, Michel Particelli. Okay, he was his portrait was made by Montcornet in 1654. He was one of the king's accountants, okay? In 1854, Morin was one of the historians of Bas-Canada, of the Lower Canada. He decided that he needed an image to picture who was Samuel de Champlain. So he went up with, he read everything about the cultural costume, coutume, back in those days, and he ended up he probably had a little beard there, a little mustache, and probably was combed his hair that way, and probably dressing that way. And he finally ended up, looking at that drawing of Michel Particelli and say, "Oh wow, he will make a beautiful Champlain."
He did.
So here we are, 167 years later, see, asking ourselves, who is Champlain? So that image that we have in our head for generations of Samuel de Champlain is not Champlain. Well, I really did surprise you. That's the only drawing that we have of Champlain. The war with the Iroquois in Lake Champlain, okay? And that's him who draw himself into the action. We never see his face, okay? Well, but in 1612, he made a big map of North America, or Quebec and Canada. And some people say, or some historian or anthropological, they say that this face right inside of the sun, or in the Rose des Vents. How do you say Rose des Vents in English? Rose des Vents.
Directions.
Yeah, for the direction. Yeah, that's it. That's probably his face. So did he look in the mirror and he draw himself like that?
Looks like a woman's face.
It looks like it. Yeah, it looks like a kid's face too. So was it him when he was a kid or so? Because we know that Champlain was born in, I would say, 1570. So at that time, he had like 42 years old. He probably had beard, because most of the people, well, back in those days, the men or the men at sea, they were beard. So
It said compass, could that be?
yeah, that's a compass. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
supposed to be balanced.
Yeah, Rose des Vents would be a compass. So was that surprising? It is, eh? I see all in your faces, you're thinking, wow, they told us something. So are my questions relevant? Probably. We're not really sure with historians anymore. Do they create those stories because they do not have facts? You know, we live by the facts, we live by the proof. Historians live by the proof, and the proof are found in archives and the traces that the people in the past left for us, or in the ground, on the trees, some places hidden, you know. But if we do not have any proof of it, why not invent it then? That will make a great story, no? So that's Champlain, the Ottawa River by Champlain in 1612. And I've already told you that story, but Champlain came on the Ottawa River in 1613. He traveled in springtime, you know, because in springtime, the river was high, there were almost no leaves in the woods, and certainly there were no mosquitoes. Okay, that's the main thing why they were traveling in springtime, because mosquitoes they do what mosquitoes do. They get annoying, eh? They annoy. And after the mosquitoes, it's the black fleas, and after the black fleas, it's the brûlot, and after the brûlot, it's the tons à cheval, hein? Les tons à chevreuil. Okay, and after that, the mosquito come back. So it leaves us the winter, but with traveling during winter time, it's not a good idea on the Ottawa River. So they were traveling in springtime, and well, on the 6th of May, 1613, Champlain arrived at the foot of the Long-Sault in Carillon. And instead of doing what the Native Americans were doing, you know, like pick up their canoe in their hands, put them on their shoulder and do a portage, he decided to tie his canoe with a rope around his hand and pull the canoe from in the water and walking on the icy rocks. Early in that morning, you know, with that water fume coming up of the river and falling down on the icy rocks, you imagine what happened to Champlain? Yeah, missed a foot, fell down on his bottom, and while he was falling down, the canoe started rolling in the rapids like this. But Champlain had a rope tied to the canoe. So what happened to Champlain? He went back in the river, the icy water of the river, cold water, you know, and he was like almost drowning. He almost drowned that morning, almost lost his arm. But if it had been for the courage of one Native American that was with Champlain that morning, who jumped, dived in the cold water and saved Champlain from drowning. You know, that place that we call the Long-Sault for so many years, and that big chute that we named the Carillon chute would have been named the Champlain chute. Yeah, and you following me, eh? We would have been so famous from the whole world. You know, people who came from China, Japan, Europe, take picture of the place where Champlain drowned. Well, that was not the case. Lucky us, because Champlain continued his adventure on the Ottawa River, and he made, you know, commerce alliance with the Huron and with all other tribes, Native American. And he was, you know, famous for being the founder of Quebec. Do you think that information is true? Yeah, he was really the founder of Quebec. Yeah. But the story I just told, he described it in his book on his voyage of 1613. Okay? So the Long-Sault here in 1722. Oh, you see? Rapids, that's here, Carillon. Here, Chute à Blondeau. So, French arpenteur, land surveyor came to Argenteuil, because Argenteuil, the seigneury of Argenteuil, was conceded in 1680. So that was like almost 60 years after the passage of Champlain. And it was conceded to Charles d'Aillebout des Mussauts in 1680 by Frontenac, Charles de Buade. Yeah, he was in Quebec in that time, that famous other one from France. And he conceded that seigneury here, from the foot of the Long-Sault up to the island of Carillon. But Carillon was not written that way back in those days. It was Carion from Mr. Carillon de Fresnay. And he had a fur trade post on the island there. And Dayabou de Musso had a fur trade post here too. And he had one in Grenville too. So they were controlling all the traveling around the Long-Sault back in those days. This is why, well, they didn't have any population living in Argenteuil in those days, because before 1722, the governor of New France couldn't guarantee the security of the people living there. You know why?
The natives.
Yeah, because of the Iroquois. There was a saying back in those days that the Iroquois were eating their enemy, making soup out of their enemy. Yeah.
Those stories.
That was a saying, you know, and people got scared of being, you know, wrapped from their places and, you know, cut into little pieces while going to the village, you see, and they were saying too that they were eating their enemy because it was giving them their soul power, you know, their war power, you know. And after that, arriving at the village, you know, with the rest of you, they would make soup, just like in our kitchen with the chicken, and feeding the wives and the kids. That was a saying, you know.
Maybe it was true.
Maybe it was true. We do not have any proof of that, but just to tell you, this is why they couldn't guarantee the security of people outside on the western part of the territory outside of Montreal. So at the Long-Sault, okay, right here where Argenteuil is, just at the frontier of Chatham and Argenteuil, in Carillon, there was a saying back in 1660 that there were Iroquois controlling the Long-Sault, that they were hiding in the forest. And they were waiting for the voyageur and those who were doing the fur trades. You know, they were coming back from the west, from the Pays d'en Haut, with canoes loaded with furs. You know, that was the main richness of our territory of New France. And theirs was a saying that these people were waiting there, hiding, and doing the little wars, the petite guerre, to those people coming back. And the governor of the island of Montreal, Maisonneuve, back in 1660, he decided to hire somebody to come here to les Petits Écarts and to fight those who were hiding and to do the same thing to them. You know, if they steal the fur from ours, we could steal the fur back from them. See? By hiding too. So that was the plan. It was war, you know, war was war in these days. So before getting into that story, we have here that map, the Long-Sault Rapide, like I told you. First portage from Carillon, it was 1,120 yards of portage. It's quite a long portage. And when you look at, when you're on the dike over the dam in Carillon, you look at the water is close to the land. But back in those days, you remember it was way down low, almost 60 feet down. So you had to go down. So the portage was quite an adventure for them. Lots of work. They had a second portage here at Chute-Blondeau. And then the third one, you know, they could travel just by the river, following the current. And then they had that third one back in Grenville there. So that was a lot of work. Champlain, it took Champlain 2 to 3 days to cross the Long-Sault, to go up to Grenville and meet with the Wescarini up there. So that was completely different than today. And even the land in Oxbury, see, and these islands here, everything disappeared. That island here, that's a big island, Perseverance Island. They said it was Perseverance Island because it took you a lot of perseverance to go up there. Everything is disappeared. Even the houses that the pioneers built. You know, we heard stories when they flooded the Long-Sault about the chimneys. They were disappearing through the morning. The water was coming up. And roads, just like You told us before the presentation, you could see that there was little valleys like that, and the road was going that way. But you know, the flooded pieces of the road were flooding. It's quite incredible. Quite souvenirs. That was back in February 1962 that they flooded the Long-Sault. Oh, who's that man? You remember him? Wow. Yeah, you're guessing?
No more guessing.
No more guessing, eh?
Talar des Ormeaux.
That's Talar des Ormeaux. So, does his story is real? Has he really existed? Yes. How do you know that?
He was a famous explorer,
He was a famous explorer, yeah?
and I believe the story is that he held off an Indian attack below Hawkesbury, near Chute de Blondeau, and he was the last man to survive, and of course he was killed.
Ah, okay.
And there used to be, I'm told by the old historians, there used to be crosses in a certain area. I've never been able to find them.
They're still there,
Are they where?
Hmm.
just above the dam.
Just above the, okay, we have to go. Thank you.
That's quite interesting.
They're not crosses, they're big obelisks.
Wow.
Well, I
Created.
was told by an elderly person that lived in Hawkesbury, who's now deceased, he was a dentist actually, that there were old wooden crosses, small crosses. I'm,
Okay. That's quite interesting because we have two versions here, see? And from an historian, I've read so many versions of that story you would probably imagine. People saying that the battle happened in Hawkesbury. Some say the battle happened in Chute de Blondeau. Others said it was in Carillon. Some others said it was in Granville. Some others said it didn't exist. It was a pure invention of the historian from the 19th century who wanted to give the French Canadian history and some heroes. Because the story behind Battle des Ormeaux is a story of a hero. You know, that the whole picture of his story, of his history, is to become a hero. So part of what we were saying is true. You know, he fought against the Iroquois at the Long-Sault. But where at the Long-Sault? Let's see what the people would say. We know that the Battle of the Long-Sault happened between April 1660 and May 1660. We have proof that it happened because a couple of days after the battle, Pierre Esprit Radisson, who was a coureur des bois, he wrote in his book that someplace near the Long-Sault, at des Petits Écarts, he saw the site of a major battle. He saw corpses, he saw traces of an explosion, and he wrote that it must have been a major battle there. Huh. So now we have to find, where is the Petits Écarts? Back in 1676, Delier de Casson wrote the history of Montreal, and he described the Petits Écarts on the northern side of the Ottawa River, just by the big chute, the foot of the Long-Sault. And he said, it's just like you get off the river, there's a little sandy beach, you get off the river, and then you see a little mountain that was named the Petits Écarts because when the water was flooding, it was like little highlands. And there's on top there, must have been the place of the battle. So historians start to dig the ground with archaeologists trying to find places. So was it in Quebec or in Ontario? Oh, wow, interesting question. Thomas Healy, 1951, 1952. That's probably where you heard, that's the origin of the story that you heard. He digged the ground near Hawkesbury, just by the golf course close to the river, and he found a place where there was certainly a war between the French and the Iroquois. But the thing with that, and then he said, this is where it really happened. But there were major battle on the Long-Sault from 1660 to 1700. It was the Iroquois War back in those days, you see? And there he found traces of that, of a certain war. But the common way of traveling on the Long-Sault back in those days, they never took the southern part of the Long-Sault because it was too steep, too hilly. There were no place that they could land with their canoe. So, by looking at old maps, a group of historians from the Argenteuil Museum, Hyacinthe Lambert and Dr. Rigby, they dig the ground on the northern part of the Long-Sault. This here is the Carillon chute, okay? And this here is the Carillon Canal. And by looking at the old maps and digging in the ground in 1961, just before the flooding, they found the place of the battle. And they described it in a scientific article in the Revue d'Histoire d'Amérique Française that was overlooked by most of the historians back in those days. And they pinpoint the place of the battle. You have the island is here, which is Perseverance Island. And you have here the site of the battle. And here, the Chute de Carillon. Today, all of this is flooded underneath 60 feet of water. So there is no way that we could dig the ground and try to find artifacts and proof that the battle really happened there. So this is why we are still interrogating ourselves as historians. Or is it in Ontario? Is it in Quebec? But I could say something. The Ontarians, they claim that the site of the battle was in their land, and that in Quebec, in Carillon, and we at the museum, we claim that the site of the battle was in Carillon. So it's a story. I remember that story. See that guy, he was 23 years old, and he was a hero. Because with 16 other Frenchmen, they started from Montreal and Ville-Marie at that time, and they traveled to the Lac des Soissons, that was Lac of the Two Mountains, and they came up to the foot of the Long-Sault, where they never expected what they saw. They were accompanied by 4 Algonquins and 40 Hurons, so they were a party of 61 going to Carillon. They got off the river and they encountered 200 warriors ready to attack Ville-Marie. They were supposed to attack Ville-Marie with 200 from the western part and 500 from the southern part from Lake Champlain. So it was 700 warriors, closing on Ville-Marie. That was supposed to happen in 1660. But Dal des Ormeaux with his friend, he kind of mixed the plan. He surprised them. So they had a fight for 3 days. But you have to remember that back in those days, the life of one person was so precious because they lost so many that they didn't want to lose any more into not a good war. But that was not a good war. So they decided to talk. And the chief of the Iroquois, he was named Chaudière Noire. He sat with Dollard des Ormeaux, and they sat and they talked. And he said, "Oh, Dollard des Ormeaux, oh, you're a good warrior. Me, Chaudière Noire, I'm a good warrior too. Dollard des Ormeaux, oh, you soldiers are good soldiers. Me, Chaudière Noire, my soldier, my warriors, oh, they're good warriors. The two of us together, me, you, Dollard des Ormeaux, we take the whole of this country, the whole of this New France. We split it in two. That's a good project. Do you think so?" But Dollard des Ormeaux was a Frenchman. He possessed the holy truth and the big science and everything. And he said, no. So the battle started again. For 7 days they fought. Donald de Zamou, he was hiding in a little behind a little palace of spruce, and they were fighting, like they had 200. But Chaudière-Noir, he knew that the French would never agree on their project, so he decided to send an emissary to Lake Champlain, and from Lake Champlain they went to Ontario and back to the Long-Sault, and they fought 700 against 61. But I have to tell you something. Back in those days, there was a common thing that some warriors from one team would be traded to the other team, or would be just like free agent. Hockey free agent was like that. They decided on, a nick of time, I'm going to go play with them. I'm sure I'm going to win. So the 39 Hurons changed team. So it was 739 against 61 minus 39. That gives us 22 people. Yeah. They fought for 7 days. Even in shift, like from 8 to 4, 4 to midnight to 8. 200 at a time. And they fought like, wow. Up until the time that Donald de Zamou, he was at the, he was almost, dying, and he prayed God. He said, "Oh, give me something that I could throw to them." And he looked there and said, "Wow, that was a big, barrel of powder." And he thought in his mind that by lighting that powder, and throwing it in the warriors on the other side, there will be a big explosion. Many will die, and we'll have the time to go back to Ville-Marie and tell the people in Maisonneuve, they're coming. So he decided to do that. And I got to tell you something. In my story, Donald de Zamou, he was weighing 300 pounds, and he was 7 foot high. He was a strong guy. And he took that barrel of powder, he lighted up, and he threw it so hard and so far that the barrel was traveling, flying in the air up to Cushing. Cushing, that's about 5 kilometers from there, from the site of the battle. And there was a big trees because, close to the Long-Sault, there were big trees. With a tree in those days, we could, build a ship to go and sea, not to travel a river, Champlain, he told everybody that was, Champlain had big trees, and that tree was going up to 259 feet high. And the barrel was flying like this, and it touched the last branch on the top of the tree. And then you know what the tree does when they're hit by a barrel? Yeah, they bend. So it started bending for 2-3 hours. Everybody stopped fighting. The Iroquois, the French, the Hurons, the Algonquins, everybody just look at the tree bend and bend and bend and bend and bend. And then after that, the barrel hit the ground. What happened? In real life, as in storytelling, yeah, it came back where it came from. Right in the face of Donald de Zamou, and bang, big explosion, everybody dies. Well, not everybody, because otherwise, who would have told us that story? See? Yeah. So that is the thing with ancient history. Are we really sure that everything that they told us is true? A lot of what I told you is true. About the tree, that's for sure. So Donald de Zamou was a hero, because whatever happened that day, was it in Quebec, was it in Ontario, something happened that saved the colony of New France in that day. And we know for sure that the Iroquois, they never attacked Ville-Marie on that year. And that 40 years later, they signed a peace treaty with the Iroquois in 1701. So it ended up all the wars between native tribes and New France. But later on, we decided to celebrate the memory of this young man. And they were all young. They were all under 30 years old. It reminded me of the story of the soldiers from the First War. You see, some of them had 17 years old. Yeah. The age of my son. I can imagine. So Dollar des Ormeaux was, see, just you look like me without the beard. His memory was celebrated everywhere, and in Argenteuil, after the government of Canada decided to celebrate this adventure. And in Argenteuil, what is there to remember? We have this. So that comes up
That's
to your
what I was
story.
referring
Yeah.
Right.
These are the Carillon monoliths, okay? It's just by the Carillon Dam. This is an public art installation made by an architect, taught by an architect, Jacques Folkribas. At one time, he's a writer, and he was editor of the La Presse Journal in Montreal. And in 1963, Hydro-Québec asked him to create that special memorial for the remembrance of the battle. They decided to do it in Quebec because probably Hydro-Québec felt they kind of flooded the real truth. So they were feeling probably a little bit guilty about it. So with the government of Canada and the government of Quebec and Hydro-Québec, that was a PPP project back in those days, public and private project, okay? Back in those days, they invested like a couple of millions of dollars to create in the Carillon Park that installation. I was taken in 2010 in winter time. And the commemorative plate told us the story of people fighting at the Long-Sault. Some Iroquois, some Algonquins, some Frenchmen. They fought in May 6th, 1660 at the Long-Sault. Sorry. So around the 21st, the month of May, in the year 1660, men that came from France, in New France, from the Huron country, the Iroquois country, the Algonquin country, fought close to here, close by here. We have to celebrate the memory of their common sacrifice. It's quite solemn, eh? And it is so beautiful. The thing with these monoliths, there are 18 monoliths, 17 for the Frenchmen, and only one for the Native American who died there. So can you imagine that in 63-65, they still had only less than 1/10 of our attention. But when Folkribas created that memorial, he wanted to be a perspective kind of memorial. So he got inspired by Le Corbusier, who was a great architect in France, and he used the modular. The modular, it's like everything at the height of a man. So from everywhere that you look at the monoliths, you will feel like that it's not that big, but when you get inside the monoliths, you feel like, wow, this is really incredible. Some of them, they go up to 16 feet high. And you can walk through the monolith. And the other thing, by walking in the monolith, you will never have the chance to see the whole of the installation unless you are flying over it. See? And they brought back these little, that's a bomb, markers that were put by the Carillon Canal, Grenville Canal, and Chute de Blondeau Canal, because, you know, back in the 1900s, from 1819 to 1834, 15 years, people worked to dig the ground to do canals, navigation canals around the Long-Sault. And those people came from Britain, they came from Quebec, they came from Scotland, they came from Ireland. And those are the pioneer families that settled in Argenteuil after. They dig the ground, By digging the ground, they thought they were digging through sand. Remember the story I told you before, that these are the oldest rocks on the planet Earth, and the thicker, you know, les plus durs. So they had to dig through that. In those days, they had no dynamites, only black powder. So they were doing holes with file briquet, you see, digging holes, filling it with black powder, you know, just like the Ormeaux, hiding behind trees and rocks and lightening up that powder, black powder, bam, exploding the rocks, digging the ground to 10, 15 feet to do the canals. And then after that, they had écluses, locks, 11 locks on the canal. It's quite incredible. You see, they work like, they say that they removed 1/6 of the Cheops pyramids out of the rocks of Argenteuil to build the canal. 1/6 of the Cheops pyramids. Where they put it? I don't know. Well, they threw it on the other side to Ontario. Well, this is why they say that people in St. Andrews, they were rock trolls, you know, pitcher de roche. Yeah. Oh, you see, that guy is supposed to be serious. You know, he's an historian. That's the Battle of Long-Sault monolith. You see, and it was made like a big V, like victory. Yeah. And Falk-Riva, just one little details here. There was a water pool at the foot of Battle des Ormeaux monolith, because he said that in that water that's not moving, you know, it was still water, life would be recreated every spring around the memory of Battle des Ormeaux. So with the frogs, with the plants that coming back, and after that, you know, close to fall seasons, probably you wouldn't dive into that pool. So these are the monoliths. So that's the place. It's easy to go there. Right? You just go by Carillon Park, near the Carillon Dam. You go up the hill, you tell that little guy at the fence, you say, I'm going to see the monolith. Robert Simard told me to go visit it. And you can go there with your family, your friends, your little travel. It's really a beautiful place. You have the water, you have the dam just beside it. And you at home, you could take a special trip from New Zealand or from California to come to Carillon and pay respect to our ancestors, your ancestors. That's the pool again. I love these pictures. And that's me, right? So yeah, I kind of fit in, eh? We used to hang out there. I was 16, 17 years old. It was great times we had there. So that's it. Sorry, you have any questions? Yeah.
The book 1491 or 93, who is the author?
Charles C. Mann, M-A-N-N.
Thank you.
Okay.
You must know Jean-Louis Coteau.
Yeah.
He lives here in town.
Yeah.
And we had a presentation. Don, do you remember the name of the archaeologist from the South Shore that was a friend of his that gave a tremendous presentation?
I don't remember his name, but
Yeah.
and then made the report.
Yeah, and he, what he was talking about was 5,000 years of history in this part of the world. So it's similar in a way to some of the stuff that you told us. But one of our local friends, Lois, she was there, and she said, you know what? After hearing about spear points and arrowheads, she went and she had on her mantle something her brother and her had found as kids at their cottage. And she got in touch with the archaeologist and sent images and size and everything. And he looked at it and he said that was about a 5,000-year-old
Wow.
spear point, not an arrowhead, because it was about this long.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that was Lois Russell.
Wow.
And so she, like she didn't realize she had such a piece of history sitting on her neck.
It's incredible, those stories, but because we think that America is brand new. It wasn't inhabited, but it was a long time before the first contact. Yeah, it's ancient. Yeah.
Just the supposition, the telling of the stories, that there was nobody here, and was that to please the royalty or the people who sponsored these expeditions to keep them happy? But hey, look what we found, this empty land with all these riches.
Yeah,
Look how heroic I was.
Probably because you see the main reason why they crossed the ocean was what? Not to find gold. They were looking for the passage. The passage to China. That's what they were looking for.
That's what Champlain called Russian.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, probably.
Well, that was the story.
Yeah. Okay. Well, every story is good, eh? It's just a question of interpretation. Yeah. So you have any other questions?
A question that's kind of just a little parenthesis, that you said there was a piece that was made in 1700, c'est la Grande Peine de Montréal.
Yeah, la Grande Peine de Montréal.
And I just got book, I want to read that.
Mhm. Well, at home, do you have any question? Yeah.
Anybody on Zoom would like to ask a question, please just unmute yourselves, and you can ask Robert questions as well if you have some. Anybody else in the audience have any questions?
It was a very good presentation.
Thank you. Well, I hope you had a lovely afternoon, eh, with the sun outside. We could have done it outside, but probably won't be able to see the pictures. So. But it was great coming back and seeing you all in person.
Yes.
With your smiles, and you at home too.
Thank you, Robert. And I think that we like that you're not always 100% serious. And I think we all love your stories, so I certainly enjoy them. And thank you so much for another great presentation. Thank you all for coming in person. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.